a native of Ukraine who traded his honor, dignity, and family for a place in the sun at the feet of a bloody dictator. One of the oldest among Putin's accomplices, walking in lockstep with the balding one since the days of Sobchak's mayoralty in St. Petersburg.
This is big money and a great deal of trust for young men.
A Soviet intelligence officer who coveted the sacred, namely the independence of Russian courts, as well as the status and impunity of FSB agents.
He will certainly be sent to jail, I remarked.
A Kremlin fixer who at various times oversaw issues related to the occupied Transnistria, the Caucasus, Crimea, and Donbas.
The East is a delicate matter.
An Olympic champion and recipient of orders, the author and architect of the reputational triumph and recognition of the ugly duckling Putin.
Everything looks so beautiful from here. Oh, look, one of the rings didn't open.
The loyal squire of Russia's man-eater, a key figure in the dictator's inner circle, and at the same time a bureaucrat respected in liberal and opposition circles.
He always made a very good impression on me, Dmitry Kozak.
The only one among the servants who didn't completely bend to the madness of the deranged Tsar when he finally lost his mind.
They say the Tsar is not real.
Who is he? A mankurt obediently dancing to the tune of the bloody little Tsar, or a planted Kozachok who openly challenged his master to claim the status of ataman? And what are Kozak's chances of becoming a replacement for the bunker villain? Dmitry Kozak is one of Putin's most ambiguous puppets. The future champion of the Russian world was born in 1958 in the Ukrainian village of Bandurovo in the Kirovorad region.
Hey bro, do you honestly remember how we used to study right here in this small village? Tell me, how exactly did you study back then? You did it very well, didn't you?
After finishing school, Kozak went to serve in the Soviet army. The very same army where hazing and obedience ruled. And humiliating the younger ones was the main way for insecure mediocrities to assert themselves.
100 extra duties. For what?
An army where theft and the greed of generals and officers went hand in hand with career advancement. And instead of learning combat skills, soldiers painted grass and worked from fence to lunch break. T.
You want to go home to your mommy, don't you? Need to pee, do you?
At the same time, according to Dmitry, his service was interesting and exciting. After all, he didn't serve just anywhere, but in the elite special forces of the main intelligence directorate. In '78, shortly before the start of the Afghan war, Kozak was discharged. Putin's future accomplice was clearly lucky. If things had gone just a little differently, Dimka's service wouldn't have seemed so interesting and exciting.
And who's going to protect mommy? Me.
After returning to civilian life, Kozak enrolled at the Vinnytsia Polytechnic Institute. And in the 1980s, he left Ukraine to try his luck in Bandit Petersburg. In Russia, stealing train cars is much safer than stealing bicycles. In St. Petersburg, Dmitry Nikolaevich graduated from the law faculty of the Zhdanov Leningrad State University, the very same university where his future bunker boss studied. After graduation, he started working at the local prosecutor's office.
Tell me, madam, are you the prosecutor here? We are. Everything is ours. The whole city is ours.
The turning point came in '94, when Dmitry Kozak joined Anatoly Sobchak's team, becoming the head of the legal committee of the St. Petersburg mayor's office, and at the same time, a colleague and accomplice. At that time, to the pale moth Vovochka Putin.
Do you remember how we took down the Belozerskis?
From St. Petersburg, Kozachok followed his master to Moscow. In the capital, Dmitry first became the head of the government staff, and then deputy head of the presidential administration. Putin entrusted his old comrade with important foreign affairs. Thus, the former KGB officer ordered the former GRU Special Forces officer to deal with Transnistria.
Do you sell a Slavic wardrobe?
At Putin's suggestion, Dmitry Nikolaevich dove headfirst into solving the Moldovan issue. In 2003, the so-called Putler was developed. The Kozak Memorandum, which imposed agreements on official Chisinau, was in many ways similar to the Minsk agreements. For some inexplicable reason, or rather at Moscow's request, the Unitary Republic was supposed to become a federation. Doesn't that sound familiar? With special status for the Banana Republic of Transnistria and the large pro-Russian region of Gagauzia.
This has happened before.
The Kremlin's plans, led by Kozak and carried out with the help of Russian propaganda, were thwarted by the Europeans, as well as hundreds of thousands of Moldovans who actively protested against the memorandum being imposed by Moscow. Essentially, it was Dmitry Kozak to whom the Russian dictator entrusted the most important area for Russian imperialists: relations with post-Soviet countries. And after Transnistria, Putin's loyal Kozak got involved in the war with Georgia. It is Dmitry who is the gray eminence behind Abkhazia and South Ossetia, and this remained the case right up until Kozak's resignation in 2025.
I propose a game to you. On my side.
In addition to spreading the Russian scent over the territories of the former Soviet republics, the Russian Führer entrusted Kozak with overseeing the most important project for his international image, the Sochi Winter Olympics.
Delicate snowflakes slowly and quite spectacularly begin to transform into the iconic 5 Olympic rings.
The law is already like this.
We can see everything so beautifully from here. Oh, look, one of the rings didn't open.
Globally, despite massive financial injections, corruption scandals, and fiascos, at the opening ceremony, the Olympics fulfilled its mission. And Kozak, who hasn't been much tainted by corruption scandals, which is unusual for Putin's inner circle, once again proved himself to be an effective official. Of course, this was largely thanks to Putin's oil dollar cash cow, which generously sponsored this auction of vanity and embezzlement.
There are currently no risks, threats, missed deadlines, or violations of construction quality.
Efficiency and the absence of a ravenous greed for profit are Kozak's main differences from the others, Putin's boyars. Compared to the luxury-loving yacht enthusiasts like Lavrov and Peskov, Medvedev with his multiple palaces and factories, and the dollar billionaire, Matvienko Dmitry lives quite ascetically. With an official income of over 20 million rubles a year, Kozak owns several plots of land, apartments, a residential house with an area of over 700 square meters, and a German luxury car.
However, that is certainly not the only thing to consider.
In addition to Kozak himself being of Ukrainian origin, both of Dmitry Nikolaevich's wives are also Ukrainian by origin. The first one, Lyudmila Kozak, director of the charitable foundation A Family for Every Child. The second wife, Natalia Kvacheva, is a lawyer at a law firm. Despite their origins, all of them have forgotten their homeland, assimilating with the rest of the Moscow elite.
I am Russian, but do not really start pushing it.
Following the success in Sochi and the subsequent aggression against Ukraine, it was to the Ukrainian mankurt in particular. Putin once again entrusted the most important area for him, the social and economic integration of occupied Crimea into Russia, to him.
Crimea got another overseer. In the Russian government, Deputy Prime Minister Dmitry Kozak will be responsible for the republic. This was announced by Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev.
While most of Putin's team remain in their positions and grow fat on money in exchange for civility, kissing up and loud public salutes from the heart to a rubber backside, Kozak has his own opinion. There is
Putin, there is Russia.
Unlike most groveling sycophants, Dmitry can afford to contradict the Russian Führer. After all, he doesn't just show, he proves his effectiveness. In 2020, there is a reshuffle in the Kremlin regarding the Ukrainian direction. Putin replaces the outright Ukrainophobe, the architect of the annexation of Crimea and the war in Donbas, Surkov, with Kozak. And it is with him right up until the start of the full-scale war. That official Kyiv will conduct negotiations.
The process of conflict resolution, regrettably and unfortunately, I can't honestly claim or boast that we have successfully reached a conclusion. Agreed decisions.
Against the backdrop of Surkov, who, while negotiating, was simultaneously giving interviews in which he openly declared that Ukraine was a non-existent state, Kozak seemed like a much more reasonable representative of Moscow. Moreover, if we are to believe the Western press, the former Ukrainian Kozachok himself genuinely believed in diplomacy. First, at that very Security Council meeting where the head of foreign intelligence, Narishkin, was so frightened he forgot how to speak Russian, Kozak was the only one who spoke out against launching a full-scale war.
Speak plainly. I will support the proposal to recognize. Will support or do support. Speak plainly, Sergei. I support the proposal to just say it one way or the other.
After February 24th, according to the New York Times, Kozak suggested to Putin that they stop the fighting in Ukraine and start peace negotiations. Moreover, he refused to carry out Putin's order to demand Ukraine's capitulation. And not only did he refuse, he did so categorically and firmly, even suggesting to the little Tsar that he should either arrest or even shoot him.
Do you have any idea what I could easily do to you for this?
I know.
According to the Moscow Times, Dmitry Kozak warned the Russian leadership about the severe consequences of invading Ukraine. And he warned that Ukrainians would fiercely resist. But despite what seemed to be a blatant act of disobedience to Botax Likum, Kozak did not lose his seat in the Kremlin. It's just that the role of the main person in charge of the Ukrainian issue shifted to Sergei Kirienko. At the same time, Dmitry retained his most important tool, access to the dictator himself.
Instead of deciding to chop off his head, let's grant him some additional time to fully return to his senses.
After his démarche against the war, on Putin's orders, Kozak switched to the domestic track. But even here, Dmitry managed to attract the attention of the West and seriously frighten Putin's security officials. On the eve of his resignation, Kozak sent a letter to the Tsar in which he once again criticized the war and also proposed a series of reforms in the country's economic, judicial, and law enforcement systems. These included unprecedented innovations for the Putin regime, the independence of the judiciary, and a reduction in the power of the security forces. Of course, Kozak's plans were never meant to come true because the fish rots from the head, and Putin is the head. The main source of decay and rot is the corrupt and entirely government-dependent judicial system, as well as the total control of the security forces. These are the unshakable pillars of the Putin regime.
Remember this, it is corruption that will destroy this country.
Now Kozak has been put out to pasture, retired. In the Western media, he is being cast as almost the main successor to Putin, under whom it would once again be possible to have a dialogue with Russia. And that makes sense, given the backdrop of the pompous, blood-crazed, and unpunished, senile, vile little Putin. Kozak doesn't look as repulsive, but don't be fooled. Anyone who has tasted from the bowl of imperialism will forever carry the stench of the Russian spirit. Dmitry Nikolaevich is just as much a chauvinist as Puelo. It was Kozak who implemented dozens of successful projects for the Putin regime. Brick by brick, he was building up the empire and paving the way for the Moscow Tsar to start the war.
We will pass a law for the people that will make lies mandatory.
Absolutely. Dmitry Kozak is atypical for the Kremlin elite, an example of dissent and disagreement. He stands out favorably from the rest of the puppets like Dmitriev, Matvienko, Narishkin, Shoigu, Medvedev, and company. But it is precisely this that makes him many times more dangerous than the other ridiculous clown politicians, Putin's lackeys. And although perhaps somewhere deep down he still remembers that he is Ukrainian, a Cossack who has sworn allegiance to the enemy will never become a true Cossack. I want to remind you that this video is created for entertainment purposes and contains elements of satire and irony. All facts and events are presented in a hyperbolized or exaggerated form to convey a comedic or dramatic effect. We do not aim to mislead, but simply focus on humor. Kindly please take this with a beautiful smile.